analyzing the uncertain times we live in, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Korach, from Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh. We live in a very uncertain time, certainly politically in Eretz Yisrael right now, a time that begs for understanding, analysis. We, a year and a half ago, celebrated the most remarkable World Siyum Shas around the entire world, an outstanding demonstration, maybe unprecedented in the Golas demonstration of Kavod Shem Shemaim, Kavod HaTorah, Chizik and Limud HaTorah. And immediately thereafter, the world was plunged into the darkness and the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and people were locked in their homes. People couldn't go to shul, couldn't go to the Beis Medrash. Right after this period of Kavod Shem Shemaim, Chizik HaTorah, coming together around the whole world. And then we were locked in our homes. Couldn't even go to shul. Unprecedented. And then all the things that happened over the last year and a half. Let us analyze these events in the context of our history, of what we learned from the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim. Let us analyze some of these events through the perspective, through the lens of our history. One of the greatest kings, the Malachim, one of the greatest Malachim the Klal Yisrael ever had was Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Chazal tell us that he was destined perhaps to be the Mashiach, but it was not to be. The Psukim tell us about Chizkiyahu HaMelech that he was one of the greatest kings. He brought Klal Yisrael to Tshuva. He removed the Avodah Zarah from Klal Yisrael. He was Matayr them and Mekadosh them. He was Mechazik the Bedek Abayas. He gathered Klal Yisrael together to Chag the Chag Pesach, and there was such a Simcha Gedola, and they celebrated the Chag Pesach for another 7 days. And the Pasuk says, V'atahi Simcha Gedola b'Yerushalayim. There was such a great Simcha when they gathered Klal Yisrael together to be Chagig the Chag Pesach. And again, another 7 days, there is such a great Simcha. V'atahi Simcha Gedola b'Yerushalayim Kimimei Shloimeh ben David Melech Yisrael Lo Yechazois b'Yisrael. There was never such a demonstration, outpouring of Simcha from the time of Shloimeh HaMelech, Chanukas Habayis, the Beis HaMikdash. Unbelievable demonstration of Simcha. And they were Mechazik the Bedek Abayis, the Beis HaMikdash, and he did such wonderful deeds. The Pasuk says, "V'chol ma'aseh asher heichel ba'avodas Beis HaElokim v'Torah v'mitzvah lidrish le'elokov v'chol levava asa v'hitzliach." Chizkiyahu HaMelech wholeheartedly, through his whole heart and nefesh, and he was Isaac and Avodas Beis HaElokim, the Torah mitzvah lidrish le'elokov, and also v'hitzliach, he had hatzlach, he had gevaldige siyata d'shmaya. And immediately the Pasuk says, Achrei hadvorim v'ha'emes ha'ela, immediately after these events and v'ha'emes and these truths, what happened next? One would think, after all this Kiddushim Shemayim, this Gevaldik Kiddushim Shemayim, the Torah and the mitzvahs, we'll see him. What happened next? His world was plunged into darkness. Acharei advorim v'emes elabos Sancheir melech Asher v'yova v'Yehuda v'yichan ala arim v'tzuras v'yomer levikom elov. Sancheir came with his massive army to destroy Yerushalayim, to destroy Klal Yisrael. What's the pshat? Acharei advorim v'emes. After all that they did, and Chizkiyahu elevated Klal Yisrael, his Mekadosh and Matan elevated Klal Yisrael after these words, advorim v'emes, Sancheir comes to destroy them all. What's the pshat? How could that be? So what happened when Sancheir came? So they called out to Hashem. They did every shtadlis in every which way, and they davened to Hashem. They called out to Hashem, and there was this unbelievable nes that his army camped outside Yerushalayim in the middle of the night. The Malach came, and 185,000 of those soldiers died in their sleep. They did not wake up. An unbelievable nes nigla. And after that nes, after that unbelievable nes, the Pasuk says that Chizkiyahu HaMelech took ill. And Yeshaya Novi said to him, Bayomim Ahem Cholech Chizkiyahu Lomus. Bayavelav Yeshua ben Amoitz v'Hanovi v'Yomer Elav Komar Hashem Savla Beisocha Ki Meis Ata V'Loi Sichya. You're going to die. Meis Ata V'Loi Sichya. You're going to die in this world. V'Loi Sichya and Olam Haba. You're not even going to get Olam Haba. Chizkiyahu Melech is going to die and not get Olam Haba. All the tzidkas that he did. Why? Chazal tell us he was not Isaac and Pru'ervu because he saw B'Nevuah that he would have a son who would be a Rosh. He would have a son that would be a Rosh, so he was not Isaac and Pru'ervu, was not Mekayim the mitzvah of Pru'ervu. Yeshaya Navi told him, you're going to die. You're not going to have Olam Haba either. Chizkiyahu said, but he saw B'Nevuah that he was going to have Rosh. Why are you looking into the secrets of the Rebbeinu Shalom? You have it, Tzivi, you're commanded to be Isaac and Pru'ervu, and that's what you have to do. And don't look into the secrets of Hashem. So Chizkiyahu said, well, give me your daughter as a wife, and your schos and my schos, maybe I'll have a son. Yeshai said, it's too late. Chizkiyahu said, stop. I have this tradition, I have this Messiah, even if the sword is on a person's neck, he's about to die. You should still ask Rachman from the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's never too late. So he davened. He davened to the Kir, and we learn out Hilchos Tefillah from Chizkiyahu Melech. He davened to the Kir, and he had a son. And that son, Taka, turned out to be a terrible Rosh, Menashe. But he had a son, and he was saved. Through a nes, he was saved. But Chizkiyahu Melech, after all these tzidkis, and he thought he had machshava l'shem shamayim, the punishment would have been so severe. How do we understand that? After this Maisa with Chizkiyahu and Yeshaya, we have another Maisa that's recorded 3 times in Tanakh. Very unusual. It's very unusual that there be a Maisa that's recorded 3 times in Tanakh. It's recorded in Malachim, in Yeshaya, and in Divrei Hayomim. And it's recorded that after this nes, it says that emissaries were sent. Ba'isa shalach b'raydach baladan ben baladan melech Babel's farm minchel Chizkiyahu ki shoma ki cholach Chizkiyahu. He heard about Chizkiyahu was sick. He heard about this nes. He sent shluchim emissaries to hear about this great miracle. Chizkiyahu greeted them. He showed him his treasures. Chizkiyahu was incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful and wealthy, powerful. He had kavod and fame and glory. So the shluchim came and he showed him all the treasures. He showed him the treasures. And it was considered to be a terrible affair. It was considered to be a terrible, terrible affair what he did. Vayama Yeshayahu Hanavi al Melech Chizkiyahu Vayomer lo Ma Amu Anoshim Elo Me'ayin Yavo Elach Vayomer Chizkiyahu Meretz Choika Bo Mibo. They came from Bovel, and Yeshaya asked him, "What did you show him? What did they see?" And he said, "I showed them everything. I showed them all my treasures." Vayomer Yeshua al Chizkiyahu Shema Dvar Hashem. Listen to the words of Hashem. Hine Yomim Boim ve'Niso Kol Asher ve'Veisecha v'Asher Othro ve'Veisecha Ad Hayom Ezeh Bavel v'Lo Yivasher Davar. Amar Hashem u'Benecha Asher Yetzim Imcha Asher Toiled Yikach or Yikchu v'Yisarisim Behecha Melech Bavel. Your descendants were going to go into exile. On account of this, your descendants will go into exile, and your descendants will be Sarisim to Melech Bavel to be a Golus. What was such a terrible affair? He showed them the treasures. What was so terrible? Now this response is even more puzzling. What is Chizkiyahu's response? Chizkiyahu who davened, who is the great Baal Tefillah. We learn out the Hilchos Tefillah, the great Baal Tefillah from Chizkiyahu Melech. He davened that the army of Sancherib should not destroy them, that then he davened and the armies of Sancherib were destroyed with a nace. The tefillahs of Chizkiyahu, he was critically ill. He was about to die. His tefillahs saved him through a nace. And now that he's told in account of this Avera that there will be a Golus and his descendants will be Sarisa Melech Bava, one would assume, of course, that Chizkiyahu would daven to Hashem, would beseech the Rabbeinu Shalom. What does Chizkiyahu do? It's recorded 3 times in Tanakh. What does Chizkiyahu do at this point? Vayemer Chizkiyahu al Yeshaya Toy Dvar Hashem Asher Dibart. It's fine, it's good. I accept it. Vayemer Haloi Im Shalom Ve'emes Yeh V'yomai. It'll be peace in my time. It's fine. In my days it'll be peace. What does this mean? Chizkiyahu, the great Baal Tefillah, who davened, who saved Klal Yisrael from Sancherib, who saved himself from his Machla. There's going to be a Golus. His children's descendants are going to be Sarisal Melech Bovel. He doesn't daven. Taiva Dover, it's great. I accept it. It's fine. It's not going to be. It's fine. I'm not going to accept it. I'm accepting it's not going to be in my lifetime. What is the pshat? What is going on over here? Perhaps the pshat is as follows. Chizkiyahu Melech, he elevated Klal Yisrael. He raised Klal Yisrael. He was Mekadosh Shem Shamayim, Mechanik the Torah, Mechazik the Beis HaMikdash. They were on the loftiest level, and after these events, these Dvorim and this Emes, Sancherib came. Zok the Malbim, Sancherib came. Chizkiyahu was worthy of bringing about a nace to Klal Yisrael. And it looked like this was a calamity. It looked like this is going to be a tragedy, but this was the vehicle, the Hechatimsa, to bring about this great nace, and Chizkiyahu was the Shaliach to bring this about. It looked like it was so terrible. After this Kovod Shem Shemayim, elevating Torah, strengthening Torah, world siyum, darkness. But that was a vehicle to bring about the nace, which Chizkiyahu Melech did, and he could have been the Mashiach. And after this great nace, he took ill and he was about to die because the Kodesh Baruch was medaktik and the tzaddikim echut Sarah. He was such a great tzaddik, and even though his cheshbonis was a shem shamayim, because he saw b'nevuah that he would have a son who would be a Rasha, nevertheless, the Rebbeinu was medaktik echut Sarah, but Chizkiyahu was mispala. And he was saved. And he had unbelievable siyata d'shmaya, wealth and glory. And Chazal teaches that there was a mashu shebemashu, which we cannot comprehend. But a mashu v'mashu of perhaps keich v'yoitz miyodi, or perhaps of something that we can't comprehend, kivyochol, of Gaiva Kivyochol. These emissaries came. They came and Chizkiyahu showed them his glory. Where he could have been Mekadosh Shem Shamayim and talked about the nace of the Rebbeinu Shalom and talk about Kovod Shamayim, he could have been Mekadosh Shem Shamayim even further. He showed them his wealth. He showed them his riches, his oitzros, his glory, his koyach. And he was not Mekadosh Shem Shamayim the way he should have. And for that, he was no longer worthy of being the Mashiach. And he was told that there will be a Golus. That he was not the Mashiach. And there will be a Golus. How did this happen? The great Chizkiyahu Melech, this mashu shebemashu kivyochol v'chet, which we cannot comprehend. But how did this come about? There's a pasuk in this Maisa that's related in Malachim. The Maisa is related in Malach, but this pasuk is not mentioned. This incident is related in Yeshaya, but this pasuk is not mentioned. In Divrei Yomim base, Lamed Beis. Here, it's revealed to us, something which has not been revealed before. It talks about all the great deeds of Chizkiyahu Melech, and it says, "V'chein b'melitze, however, v'chein b'melitze, sorry, Bavel, Meshalchim, Alav lidroish hamoifis hashahar v'aretz." When these shluchim came to hear about the great moifis, the great nace that happened in Eretz Yisrael, now the pasuk says, and this is a critical point, Azava ha'elokim, Hashem left him. He did not have the siyata d'shmaya at that point. The Rebbeinu Shalom Kivyochol departed from him. Why? Linasoisa ladas kol bilvavai, to test him, to see what was in the depths of his heart. At that point, he had this great test, this great nisayon. Hashem now left him. And he was left alone to see what was in the depths of his heart. He had this test and he failed. And Yeshaya Navi tells him that he will not be the Mashiach. He failed. Because he should have been Mekadeshim Shemayim when he was alone, when the Rebbeinu Shalom left him. So he said, Chizkiyahu Melech said, that is good. He was matzdik the din. And he knew at this point that this was a test. And he failed the test. So he didn't daven at this point because he failed the test. And therefore he accepted it. He accepted it. It's correct. It's correct. It's correct. It's right. I failed the test. It'll be peace in my time, meaning it's not a gzera on me. It's not something I can daven for. It's a test to see if I would be the Mashiach. I failed, and therefore I accept this test. We see from here certain fundamental principles that sometimes Mekadeshim Shemaim, sometimes we elevate Mekadeshim Shemaim, we do all these gewaldige things, and we think that the next step will be Oyer v'Simcha, and sometimes it's darkness. Sometimes Rachmanas it's Sancherev, sometimes it's a pandemic. But through that, if we're Mekadeshim Shemaim through the darkness, then a nace comes on our hand and Hashem chooses us to be Mekadeshim Shemaim further, but we have to be vigilant. Because the more we're Mekadeshim Shemayim, the more we're Zeicha, the more Siyata D'Shmaya that we have, the more Kodesh Baruch is Medaktik and Tzadikim Kechut HaSaira. And there are times, and there's some times when after all of the Nisim, and after all of the Siyata D'Shmaya, and after all that Hashem bestows upon us, sometimes He departs us to test us. Sometimes it's Azov Elokim Lenasais Ladas Kol Bilvava, to see what is in the depths of our hearts, and sometimes it's as if we don't have the Siyata D'Shmaya, and it's at those points in that junction when we don't have the Siyata D'Shmaya, when we have that critical test, and we have to stand strong. And that's what we have to do right now. And we have to take strength from the knowledge that it only appears that Azav Elokim, Hashem is with us all the time, and we will continue to have Siyata D'Shmaya, and continue ultimately to see the great glory of Gilui Kvod Shemayim, Binyan Beis HaMikdash, B'vias Goyal B'mhera